Hey,
Hello.
hey, Gabfocus. Tommy here at Storage Pug. Welcome to another fantastic episode. Today, we're going to talk about how to increase occupancy by offering a great experience to your tenants. Melissa, how are things in Chattanooga?
Howdy from Tennessee, like Julia said in the comments just now. No, it's great here in Chattanooga, and it's it's May.
It's
It's
yes.
beautiful, and it's graduation time, and it's new baby time, and yeah, all the things going on here.
So much happening, right? New baby for
Mhm.
me. You have kiddos going to college. I mean, life is, I'm so excited for y'all.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
good stuff.
It's definitely good stuff. Well, I'm excited to have one of my good friends. I mean, Luke. I'm going to introduce you in a moment, but I feel like I've known you really ever since I've been in self storage. You and I have been we've known each other for some years,
Yes, sir.
and super glad to have you on the show today. So I'll formally introduce you here in just a moment. But everyone in the audience, welcome. This is episode 60, as in like 60, which is crazy. Melissa, you and I have done this. This is our 60th episode.
Oh my God.
And
And I still can't get my audio turned on without Josh's help.
yes. uh and like I said, we're going to talk about increasing occupancy, but not just in any specific way. We're talking about how to do it with offering a great experience to your tenants. But without further ado, Luke Westbrooks, welcome to the Gab Focus stage. Let's hear your credentials. So you've been in business in storage for 10, 12, 11 years?
13, 14, something like that.
13,
Getting on up there.
14.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
welcome. Where are you based out of and who do you work for?
I senior self storage associate and IT coordinator for Zip Real Estate Partners in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. Um, we have about 16 properties scattered across the United States, and those are my babies.
Yeah, man. You got some cool credentials because Ziff, y'all chose, I think, and we'll dive into it some during the session here, but y'all chose three different management companies to run your properties.
Yes.
Who are the three that currently manage your properties?
Store Ease Virtual Management handles the majority of the sites. Um, Extra Space handles a handful, and then Public Storage has a property of ours in Alabama.
Yeah. So I'm excited to dig into to that
Yeah.
strategy and get into more. But yeah, we're glad to have you on the Gap Focus stage.
Thank
I
you.
think this is going to be a killer episode. Of course, y'all, Gap Focus is brought to y'all to the everyone by our teams here at Lighthouse Storage Solutions and Storage Pug. Of course, if this is your first time, welcome. We'll go for about an hour. Melissa and I will take turns hitting Luke in the face with great questions that were pre-submitted. But y'all can also and should also ask your own questions using the Q&A tool in the Zoom app there. And if this is not your first time, welcome back. We're super stoked to have y'all. Of course, this show will be recorded. This is a common question that we get. Every episode is recorded. We post it onto our YouTube channel. We post it on the Gap Focus official podcast, everywhere you listen to podcasts, and on our website. Without further ado, though, today's agenda, we're going to talk about why should we as self-storage people even care about customer experience here in 2024. We're going to talk about how, given that you should care, how can you actually go about improving it? And then how can you actually make more money and increase occupancy by improving the customer experience? So, are we ready to jump right in?
I think
Let's
so.
do it.
Let's do
Yeah.
it. Melissa, let's start us off.
All right. So, question number one. First of all, I just got to say, I got emails from people about this one. Shannon at XBS was like, yes, this is the best topic ever. Why don't people understand that customer service is so important?
Yes.
So, I'm excited about this one. And that is our first question. Why should you care about customer experience in 2024? Why is the customer experience important to that overall business strategy?
So and as with any business, our customers are our lifeblood. If we're not catering to what they need and what they're trying to tell us, then I don't think we're doing a very good job of serving our customer. So for me, it's, the amount of competition that each operator faces in their markets. At the end of the day, we're all offering the same basic concept. It's four walls with a roof and a door.
Yeah.
Your customer service sets the precedent of how that customer views your property, on top of a handful of other things I'm sure we'll get into. But for me, being able to listen to my customer and understand what they're trying to say and try and build that experience around what they're looking for has been, a major benefit to me in my management career.
Love it. How has the customer experience in 2024 been different in comparison to all the other years?
Oh, well, coming out of COVID really changed everything. Threw a curveball into the industry and really ultimately allowed tech to kind of take its seat within the industry at a bigger table than it had taken before. Obviously, some of this technology had been introduced into certain markets prior to COVID, but it wasn't until, we go into, you can't enter an office and you can't be within 6 feet of another individual that you start to see the adoption and the implementation from some of the larger players about bringing tech to the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
There is a double-edged sword, I think, with that application, because if you built your experience on a customer service model and now you're allowing tech to be involved in the experience, how do you make sure that your tech is providing the same experience to your customer? And that they could, at some same point, they could never enter your office. They could rent it online, move in, and handle
Right.
everything digitally. So how do you take that tenant and make sure that they're still receiving the same level of service and experience that you would have if somebody had come in and rented traditionally? So the convenience of having some of this tech is it's huge from a customer experience point of view. Not
Mm-hmm.
everybody needs to rent a unit between 9 and 5, Monday through Saturday. So,
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I love that line. Not everyone wants to rent a unit between 9 and 5 Monday through Friday. I love that. Honestly, I often think about that when all the businesses that because like we all don't work on the weekend. Most of us, get our weekends off, and so do a lot of the businesses who,
absolutely.
Yeah.
right. And then oftentimes my wife and like, hey, we have to do this chore. And it's like, well, that chore is only available during the week.
Mm-hmm.
And I think doing business when your customers are ready to do business or making your offering available, that's such a huge deal.
Mm-hmm.
I ran this stat, I think it was for Jane. Jane Sauls, who was our guest last month. She was putting a presentation together, and I pulled some data. Our data shows that over 30% of all rentals through online rentals happen outside of those hours.
Yeah.
So over a third of your business is coming from not Monday through Friday, 9 through 5.
And pulling that back to the actual question, like, you have to make sure that if you're using the tech, like, is your app functional? Is it providing, what you need it to provide so that you feel comfortable that your tenants can actually lease with you? Do your Bluetooth locks work? Have the batteries been changed? Do you have a way for your tenant to get in contact with a representative after hours if there is an issue with one of those things? So you're adding, a convenience factor, but you're also adding, a little bit of legwork to make sure that those options are available and accessible to your tenant base.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jenny actually just commented and said within an hour after every rental, we're sending an email out and just making sure that everything's good. And it's just adding to that extra customer service experience. I think you mentioned COVID, everybody remembers those, that year or so where we were so separated and everyone had to rely on tech. And I think some facilities kind of got used to being so tech forward when they made that plunge that they kind of backed off on customer service. And now the consumer is like, wait a minute. I don't know that I like that so much. Like I like the convenience of this thing over here. It's great, but I also want this that I used to have. And so we're now having to reevaluate at how we're using tech and not making that the forefront. The customer service has to come back out to the front again.
Right.
So
I've always, and I wrote it down, I think 5 different times in the past couple of days, because it's the message that I really wanted to say, which is, um, when you go to a McDonald's or a Walmart, you're greeted with a consistent experience.
Mhm.
And if you used self storage before, or you rented before COVID, and you had an idea of what that expectation is going to be, and you come in now and the experience that you're used to is no longer there, it does start to, provide, oh, maybe I should find, if this is what I'm
Yeah.
comfortable with, maybe I should be looking for what I was comfortable with.
Yeah.
And when you break it down into age demographics, yes, my age and younger love technology. We can go into a store, we buy everything off of Amazon. It's really easy for us. But on the same token, there is, the age demographic that wants to speak to somebody, that has questions that they want to have answered before they feel comfortable renting a unit.
Mhm.
And, the balance between those two things can be difficult.
Mhm.
Wow. Yeah. So it
Mm.
sounds like sometimes a great experience is simply a consistent experience
Absolutely.
that you're
Yeah.
doing, you're following whatever procedures you have created and you're following them each time. I love that. So
Yeah.
to that point, like, when you think of, you mentioned some of the restaurants, right? I always think, of course, we're in the Southeast, so we think Chick-fil-A
Mhm.
as offering the one of the best customer experiences. And they very much set themselves apart. So how can in self-storage, how can these great customer experiences, how can self-storage operators set themselves apart from the competition, using some of these tactics?
Yeah, and that's a very good one. And obviously, the interaction with your manager or your customer service rep is a very big piece of that. But if we're going to speak in both languages, on the tech side and the customer service side, ultimately, when somebody enters your property, the first thing they see is your curb appeal. And that's the first impression that they're going to judge you on, because they can probably drive half a mile down the street and find another storage facility.
Mhm.
So you have that first impression. And for me, it's really three big things. I know we're not discussing marketing necessarily here, but um, do you have flutter flags? Do you have A-frames? Do you have something that's drawing the eye and pulling you? Because if I can't find your facility, it doesn't matter how great your
Mm.
customer service is. And so now that I found the facility, the signage was there, landscaping, facility quality is great. Now it is your manager's turn to let themselves shine. If you can hit all three of those pieces, I really do think you've created a really great customer service experience. But if you've missed one of those pieces or let one of those pieces lack, I really think it could be a hindrance. You could have the nicest person in the world, but if you have dirty bathrooms and large items sitting in your hallways, the customer now has to weigh, do I like the manager or do I like the property? And
Right.
so doing all three things consistently really could set your site apart from your competition.
That's killer. I love that. So let's follow this line of thought, right? Different ways to improve customer experience. Let's start with communication because I think there's some awesome comments here. Melissa, you called out Jenny from Aloha. Brandy does the same. They call, they send an email.
Mhm.
One of them, I think one of y'all even offered to do a tour, right? And like these are all really like top-notch things. That's amazing. But on the communication front, Luke, like what are some of the best ways to communicate with customers? And you mentioned the different demographics. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah.
And the different communication channels that you think might be best for self-storage businesses.
When I first got started in the industry, what I loved about the leasing software we used at the time was there was just a question like on the lease that you read and said, how do you prefer to be contacted? Would you rather I call you? Do you check your email every day? Or do you prefer text messages because you're busy and don't necessarily have time to talk? And I loved that. Just asking them like, hey, if I need to get in touch with you, what do I need to do? So if you don't have that option, I think it really depends on the event or the reason why you're contacting the tenant. Obviously, in the case of an emergency, or somebody left their unit door open, or didn't lock it correctly, a phone call is really going to personalize that experience. Like,
Mhm.
hey, like this happened. I'm not just sending you a text message to let you know that it happened. I'm calling you personally to say, like, hey, I just wanted you to know. This is what's going on, and this is how, we're addressing it, or this is what we need you to do. On the flip side, I don't want to call every tenant when I'm providing them a rate increase so we can have that conversation. So, a lot of that, and, with lease changes or contract changes regarding, rate or some different rules that you might have, you may want to send it certified just to track it. Just so you can say, like, no, I did send that to you. But ultimately, it's just letting them know, and it feels very formal. Emails, I've always been a little back and forth on. I just don't, everybody has an email, but I know that my wife has 100,000 unread emails.
No one reads them.
Exactly. So,
we all have them. Some of us have multiple email boxes.
Yeah, that each have 100,000 unread.
Each have 100, yeah.
May or may not be guilty.
Right. And so your communication can get bogged down under some other things. And, once they log in and say, like, I'm not going to go through all of those, it's probably not going to happen. But, for casual conversations, just like, hey, gate's down, send an email. But for me, I've always appreciated the personalized approach of just, me or a manager reaching out and continuing to build that rapport with my tenant base. And especially, I don't want to forget this, collections. I've seen it done multiple different ways. I think your best results always come from a personalized phone call, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later. But I just want to say, like, that's a big one for me. And if you call when they owe you money, it's an interesting conversation already, and to call them and try and understand what's happening and showing a little bit of empathy and just saying, like, hey, I appreciate you answering the phone. Thank you so much. I'm going to put this note on your account. We'll call you in a week.
Yeah,
for the customer and for the site provides a relief of a burden.
Right. So you've piqued our interest. People now want to know which management software give you the ability to ask that question.
I'm trying to think. What was it? I want to say it was one of the SSA leases that was pushed through Center Shift, but this was 15 years ago. 13 years ago, probably. But it was just a little, this is when we would review leases, if you'd print them out, you'd go almost line by line. And one of my favorite ones. So when I did send them the email that they requested, and they said, you never sent it to me, why didn't you call me? You also have the piece of paper saying, like, well, you said you preferred I contacted you this way.
Oh, nice.
But,
you got the Trump, you got the receipts as
I like it.
But also, in the event of anything, major happening, you probably want to do all four. Let's call. If you can't get in touch with them, leave them a message, send them a text, send them an email, just say, hey, I did everything I could to try and get in front of them.
The best you can. So Daniel, I love that question, and Luke, in the olden days used Center Shift when he started. I think all the management softwares now will let you kind of ask custom questions. At minimum, you can add it to your lease to the end of it or in your lease summary and just have a little checkbox scenario. There are multiple ways to accomplish that, but I love the idea of just asking in general. So let's flip this around. So those are all great ways to outwardly communicate with customers. What are the different inbound channels? What are the different ways that you recommend to allow customers to contact you when they need support?
So I think you should definitely have open lines of communication to your site team. They are the face of your property, and they ultimately represent your property as a whole. So putting people behind automated lines and having them continuously enter prompts just to call and say, like, hey, I just want to figure out why the insurance on my account didn't hit this month, or just a simple question now takes 10 minutes when it was really as easy as, hey, run into the office, let's ask, or hey, here's the direct number to the office. You don't have to go through prompts or get sent to a big call center and have to try and filter your way back down. But also providing open lines of communication other than the phone. Like most companies, I believe, provide an email address, a phone number. Bonus points if you have on-site managers who live on site. They know where your mailbox and your front door are. That obviously helps a little bit. But just being available in one form or another, and just allowing them to feel like if there's an issue that they can contact you and it's not going to be a hassle.
Right. So just to bounce off this just a little bit, just so the audience is really clear about what we're talking about with communication, allowing the customer to choose how to communicate with you is for those normal contacts. It is not for the lien law piece, because there are specific ways you have to do your communications for your lien law. So just because the tenant says, "Oh, I only want to hear from you through a text message," that really doesn't mean anything when it comes time to enforce a lien. So make sure you're actually following. You revert back to, this is what the lien law requires, and this is how I'm going to take care of this communication. So they don't get to choose in
No,
all the
not,
ways.
not,
Yeah.
yeah, not on
I
that one.
just
Not
wanted
on
to
that
be
one
clear so
specifically.
there's no question about that. So we talked about communication, how we're actually talking back and forth, but let's talk a little bit about those actual move-ins. You've got the tenant, they're moving in. Is it better to offer the contactless move-in still, or requiring them to come into the office and saying, "Okay, I want to see you face to face again"?
I think there's room for both. I think you could have two stores that sit across the street from each other that could operate um, in completely differently than its neighbor. And it's what we touched on, right around the first question, which is having just the option, the convenience of being able to say, like, oh, I can make it there before 5, but also knowing if it's Sunday at 10 o'clock in the evening, and I just got out of basketball practice, and oh man, I forgot to do that. I'm not having to wait for the next business day, to actually complete this chore. It's just as easy as, do I scan a QR code? Do I visit the website? Um, and being able to process this. And you're always going to have, well, for the most part, you're still going to have a customer service rep. So if they come on site and they lease, they can still swing by the office the next day. They can still call your manager and just say, "Hey, just want to let you know everything went off without a hitch," or "Here were some of the issues I have." I don't think you have to have one or the other. And I think you can have both
Okay.
or either and still be an effective storage facility.
So I have to ask, Tommy mentioned in the beginning, you have 3 different management companies that you're working with. So how the heck does this play out in the move-in process? Do they all approach it differently, or are you very, clear on this is how this is going to be done? I mean, you've got extra space in public and then another. So like, how does that work for you?
Fortunately, the managers that we've chosen to run our facilities are very competent and have developed their own systems. Obviously the REITs didn't become the REITs because their processes are flawed. I mean, obviously they're obviously recalibrating every single day, but there's a reason they have the stores that they have. But does that mean that's the only way to do it? No. I think Extra Space and Public both did great at introducing tech to their platforms so that they could still do business when everybody else was shutting down. But at the end of the day, each of those managers still provides an excellent customer experience and a customer service experience on top of that. And they just each do it their own specific way. And I think that there's the reason we have so many independent operators in general.
Yeah.
Being able to personalize the customer experience to what you want it to be and to make sure that it's effective is crucial in our industry.
And that really does come down to the human being that's behind the desk.
It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think another way to kind of take it is like there's not one right way. There's multiple right ways. There's probably also a lot of wrong ways, there's a
For
lot of
sure.
right but there's a lot of right ways. So just because you don't do it
Yeah.
the way Luke does it, but the cool thing is Luke does it 3 different ways.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that in itself may be right or wrong, but ultimately, yeah, it comes down to the human being and the people behind the desk and the people that you're trying to service. So I love that point, Luke. That's killer, man.
And you might hear me say it multiple times, but personalizing the customer service experience. And I don't mean personalizing it for them. I mean, like me as the manager or me as the management company, what am I doing that's setting me apart
Right.
from my competitors? That is, but we'll get into like amenities and things later. But ultimately, it's that first impression. Do I feel safe? Do I believe my belongings are going to be, here long term will be fine? Do I trust the person, on the screen or behind the counter? And ultimately, when my head hits the pillow at night, do I have to be worried about it? And if you can
Right.
say, yeah, I can handle all of those things and I can make this process easy for a customer, you have set yourself apart.
You should always be delivering customer service in such a way that you never shy away from asking for that review, because you
Absolutely.
know that
Ooh.
you've already done exactly, you've given the 5-star treatment every single time, and
Yeah.
you know how it should be received. So a little bit more about move-ins. Should you offer things like moving trucks and carts and locks, and what's your take on that in the 3
So
different ways that you do this?
so yeah, it's again, this is that personalizing that experience. Do you have to have a free moving truck? No. There's a lot of stabilized storage facilities that don't offer rental trucks, U-Haul, Penske, free or otherwise. Um, do I think that you need carts? 1000%. That's why every single storage facility you visit typically has a cart. Some of these properties, can be over 100,000 square feet, and you're going to make them unload a 26-foot truck by hand as they walk, half a mile through your
That's
facility.
crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Um, but ultimately, it depends on your management style. I've worked for companies that gave locks away. I've worked for companies that required you to purchase a lock.
Mhm.
And as a manager, I always thought how crazy it is that a $20 lock, how far it can go in the closing process. How many times I've sat there and just said, fine, what if I give you the lock? And it's just like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll sign now. And it's just like,
Yeah.
after all of that, it's a $17 lock that closed the deal. So don't ever it's the smallest things,
Yeah.
the things that people don't think about. Like, I have a lock here. Yeah, it's $19. Can I eat $20 to get you to sign up and, typically potentially be here for 17, 18 months? Like, yeah, you can, but being flexible and understanding when it's appropriate could also be a boon
Mhm.
to how you do it. Well, again, some of these are going to be like, there's no real yes or no answer. It's what do
Right.
you feel comfortable offering your tenant that provides them the best experience at your facility.
So we had a couple of comments that talked about things that they do for their new customers when they move in, and
Mhm,
several of them mentioned welcome packages. Is that
mhm.
something that you find useful? Is that something that you do at your properties?
So what I always found interesting about move-in packets, and yes, I do believe one of my managers does still do packets, is the packets are really only being identified after the move-in process. So you've done the majority of the work, leading up to it, and this is just an added bonus, like a surprise. Like, hey, I left you, a lock and my business card, a pen, maybe even a bottle of water if you need it.
Mhm.
Um, it's just continuing to show like I care. You know, do the majority of the larger operators provide move-in packets or welcome gift sets? Not necessarily, but is that a detrimental to them? It's kind of hard to say.
Right.
It's not necessarily a will you not stabilize a facility because you didn't offer a welcome pack? No. Do your customers appreciate it? Yes. And to me, that means something.
Mhm.
If your
That's
customer
those
has an
repeat customers.
if your customer has an appreciation for what you're
Mhm.
doing, you're continuing to build rapport with your community, and
Mhm.
ultimately, that's what you're trying to do as a manager.
I really
Mhm.
love that. I mean, some of our top operators that we've had on, Melissa, like Nick Newcomb, that's something they do at Storage Max
Yep.
at all their facilities. And it's a low cost thing, even if it's just a bottle of water and a brochure, right? And I think like that could be all it is. And as a treat, as a consumer, you're not
Everybody
expecting it.
loves free stuff. We don't even
Yeah.
care what it is.
Yes. Yes. And a bottle of water is nice because you're sweaty, it's hot and
Yeah.
gross, especially, his facilities in Mississippi. And so it's just muggy and gross all the time down there.
Yeah.
So no, Nick, Luke, that's a cool point that yeah, this is a representation of who you are and how you want to treat your people. I
And I
love that.
think that goes a long way, especially in those situations where it is a contactless rental and they didn't actually get to interact with the person
Mhm.
necessarily.
Yes.
But it's still a very personal touch of like, I was left a gift. I did this through the online system or through the
Mhm.
app, and they still have water set out for me, or a keychain, or, whatever it may be. It's a way to add that personal touch back into it,
Absolutely.
into what can be a very, just black and white interaction there. So,
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, it's a surprise. It's what did I do to get this? Did I click the wrong box online and say I needed this? Or it's just a facility going one step above what the
yeah,
tenant expected from their experience. And so now once again you've re-evolved the tenant perspective of what that experience should be. So now if they ever leave and they go to another storage facility and they don't get their welcome pack, they're gonna be like, I should have gone and restored with the
yes,
company I left before.
yep.
So yeah, it's another piece of personalizing that experience that I think ultimately is the bread and butter of our industry.
Chef's kiss, man. That's awesome. One of the 7 Melissa Lewises posted that her facility gives out right now, because it's the spring season, they give out flower seeds. That's one of the top most unique.
Awesome.
That's so
Oh wow.
killer. Like, yeah, like that's so cool. I love that y'all do that, man. That makes me so happy. So in this, now that the customer's moved in, right? Let's move the conversation to billing processes, right? So how do you go about making the billing process as painless and as seamless and as easy as possible for your tenants?
We're going to go back to convenience on this one. Be able to take multiple forms of payment in multiple ways. If I want to call and give you a credit card, I know we the industry as a whole has kind of shied away from taking credit cards online because you can't get the signature. Um, but if I'm out of state and I don't have access to my computer and I really need some help making a payment, can I call and make a payment? Can I go online and make a payment? The real answer here is auto pay. Um, from both the customer standpoint, they don't have to worry about it, and also from the site management side, which is I don't want to have to call you next month and remind you that your bill was on the 3rd.
Mhm.
Um, but being able to take payments in multiple different ways is obviously a big benefit, and especially with the introduction of online leasing, having your portal capable of taking payments and providing receipts and making sure it's working is huge.
So the answer is auto pay. Let's
Yeah,
get
I,
these.
I've yeah, and I think that's why it's one of the more tracked KPIs in our industry. The
Mm.
higher that auto pay percentage is, typically the less delinquency you have and the less frustrated tenants you have.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What's y'all's take on cash payments? Are y'all still accepting cash at any of your facilities, or does it depend on the management company? What's your policy around cash?
I think it does depend on the management company. Obviously, for virtual management, it's a little bit more difficult to say, where are you putting the cash where it's going to be secure? Who's picking it up? Who's depositing it? Who's counting it to make sure it's correct? It adds another layer. Um, but at the facilities where you do have a person present, yes, I think you should. I still think, you correct me if I'm wrong. Is cash still king? I'm pretty sure it is. But
Money
this can go
period is still king, however you
right.
want to.
And I think we can kind of break this down back into the demographics we were speaking of earlier with age. I have no issues putting in my credit card online on my cell phone in a web portal, where somebody who's maybe not as familiar with tech just feels like, hey, I got the $100 in my pocket. I want to swing by. I want to hand it to you. I want you to hand me a receipt so I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that we're in compliance. And again, it's there's no right answer. Like, this is the only way you can do it, and this is the way you should do it. It's what is convenient for you at your location, and what do your tenants want? If you have a lot of tenants that, and you've been saying, I don't want to pay cash, but people keep moving out because they want to pay in cash, maybe let's try and figure out how to add a way to take cash or checks. But ultimately, every property is very different and has its own challenges.
Yeah. So related to the experience, so this was an experience that I actually observed early on in my self-storage career. I was visiting one of our clients actually in Maryville. And the general manager, his name is George. I still remember the conversation. He had a tenant come in, and we had just launched their website. Like, this is just brand new. They had never had online payments before. We just launched their website. And one of his tenants used to, just come in on her lunch break to pay her bill once a month. And I watched him do it. He said, "Well, we just launched our website and it has online payments capability. If you have a phone, I'd love to kind of walk you through it right now." And she's like, "Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. I don't want to come see you every month."
I love you,
I
but
still, yeah. And so I loved, I mean, there were multiple facets to that, right? One was he had the foresight to be like, "Hey, let me tell this customer who might not know about this cool thing that we have."
Right.
Mhm.
That was cool, but then getting her reaction and her feedback to it was even more awesome, because it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, this is why we do it. And so that was a really cool experience. That really stuck with me. It was like, hey, and he was a general manager at that location, and he really showed that he cared, and took his time to show the customer and like walked her through the login process and everything,
Mhm.
and that made her day, and hopefully she never had to see him again.
I
But
think that's a
again,
big
what
piece of it. Yeah, of like actually taking the time to let me show you how to do this instead of just saying, "Oh, we only take online payments now." That's a
he
completely
personalized
different
that.
thing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
personalized that whole customer interaction. So now he just did her a favor at the
Mhm.
end of the day. On the flip side, Tommy, I was managing a store, and tenant came in and paid with cash, and I said like, "Hey, well, would you I said, do you want me to go ahead and email you a receipt?" Looked me dead in the eye and said, "Do you really think the internet's ever going to take off?" And I said, "Let me print you a receipt real quick." And so, and I promise that's not a made up story. It's, I don't know if he was just trying to get a rise out of me, but it was I, I kind of just want to be like, "What do you think we're doing this on? Like, how do you think I'm taking this payment right now?"
Has he met Al Gore?
Exactly.
It was invented a long time ago. Wow.
I don't like to get into the idea of, pigeonholing customers into doing very specific things.
Mhm.
Provide them the option and let them decide how they want to interact with you as
I really
uh,
love that. Yeah. So
Mhm.
the unfun side of self-storage is collections and delinquency, right? So
mhm,
from an experience point of view, like you mentioned earlier, like maybe maybe a phone call to a customer who owes you a bunch of money, that's never going to be fun for anyone involved. But how do you go about handling collections?
it's consistency, and it's
Yeah.
for me, and I will stand on this hill until the sun goes down. And it's I found the most success was me calling, if it took every single day, to get in front of somebody and just say, "What is going on? I just need you to talk to me and tell me what's going on. If you're not going to pay, it's not fine, but I can handle that. I don't want to chase you for 62 days trying to get an idea of what's going on, just for you to come in and pay on the 61st day and say like, okay, like you could have just told me this is what we were going to do." But I don't think people, if I get a robocall for anything, I typically am not listening past the first 10 seconds. If I get a robocall saying that I owe somebody money, I might not even answer the phone. Text messages don't have the same impact, but you seeing my phone number on your phone every single day and saying like, "I owe that guy money," um, it starts to wear. And finally getting on there and just being able to put in the notes like, "Hey, spoke with so and so, said he would pay me next Thursday." Now you've said I've made contact with my tenant. They understand the process. They understand what I'm going to, what the next steps are. Because you have to tell them like, "Hey, if this doesn't get resolved, these are the next steps. Legally, I have to do so many things." Um, and once you set that precedent and you continue to do that consistently, you do somewhat train your tenant base into understanding like, man, if I don't pay my bill, he's going to call me every single day,
Mhm.
and I'm going to have to deal with this every single day until it gets paid. Um,
Yeah, Jenny, I love what you said. Reminding the customers that you're not bugging them, but you're actually trying to help avoid future payments, avoid them,
Mm.
losing their unit. And they actually, once they realize that, oh, you are really trying to help me. You're not just being a pain in my rear end. There's a point to this. That goes a long way with some tenants. Not every tenant's going to respond that way, but with some of them, it really does make the difference just having that personal touch. So, yeah, I think that's great point, Luke. We talked earlier, you mentioned what does the customer want? How do they want to communicate with us? What do they want to see on the property when we're talking about facility upkeep? What do the customers notice most about a facility?
Curb appeal, always. From the minute you walk in, if you have light bulbs out, if you have dirty doors, if you have, bed frames and mattresses laying in the center of your hallway, if you have weeds growing, a foot high on your fence line, we as managers can get property blind. We see the same thing every single day. Your tenant may only come onto the facility once a month, once a quarter, once a year, once every 4 years, haven't seen it since they put it in a decade ago. Every day they come in, it's a new experience for them. So being able to say like, hey, this is how it is, this is how it's always going to be, is a huge factor. Like I rented here because it was clean and because it was well lit and because I was comfortable. If you come back a week later and all three of those things are no longer true, do you now feel like you made the best decision? Probably not.
Right.
Where if you come in and say like, oh, like I was here a year ago, place looks even better than it did last time I was here. They're When you send that rate increase notice, they're not going to say, well, what are you doing with it? It's going to be like, no, I doubt they're going to call you and tell you, I see what you're doing with my rate increase, but it
Right.
at least
If they
allows you
know.
to say, yeah, like we are keeping this up. We're doing our best to maintain a quality
Yes.
level of service, and we're not going to slack on that. And I think
Right.
that's a huge piece. Like we can go back to bathrooms, and are you doing the little things? Are your corners swept? Are your bathrooms clean? They will notice it. And ultimately, like our first question is, they're the lifeblood of our property. They can go to any one of our competitors and get the same basic experience that we're providing.
Exactly. I love that. They rented from you most likely, or very likely. It's very highly possible that they rented with you because they liked your product on face value. What they saw, they liked. And if they don't come back till month 3 or month 6, or they come back at month 3 and there's 4 light bulbs burned out, they come back on month 6 and now there's 6 bulbs burned out, and they just got a rate increase, they're not going to be happy because
No.
you're just letting the property go. So yeah, that upkeep is extremely important.
And
What are
what oh, I was gonna say
Go ahead.
one more thing for managers with multiple facilities. I've had it where people have transferred from one of my sites to store at another branded site just because of the level of service. So if you have that at your home location and you can provide the same consistency at your other locations within other trade areas, the idea is, it's like we said, when you go to a McDonald's, it doesn't matter what state you're in, it doesn't matter where you are, you understand the experience you're going to receive. If you like that experience, you seek it out. And now it's like, hey, I'm moving. Do y'all have a property, in Pensacola? Yeah, I
Yes.
do actually. Well, can you give me the contact info? I'm going to take my stuff from here and move it straight down there because they have the idea of the level of service they're going to receive.
I
And it may
love
not
that.
even be the most convenient place for them to store at that new location, but because they know what to expect, that's what they automatically want to do. I love
Absolutely.
that. Very good point. What are some things on your property that you should regularly update?
So I went back and forth on how I wanted to answer this question because, I looked at it as a facility upkeep. Okay. We look at, here are the things that we're going to constantly be touching on a daily basis. Do you on an annual basis replace all your keypads? Not really. Do you update all of your cameras once a year? Not really. So what are the things that can really benefit your property by touching constantly? It's your lights. It's going to be your lights. How many people are actually on your property, you know, between 9 and 5 that aren't trying to lease a storage unit? A handful. But if you go back and watch your cameras, when people get off work, especially in the winter and the sun goes down, the first thing they're going to look at is my area well lit? Do I feel safe and do I feel comfortable?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're inside, everything's on motion sensors. So if as people walk through, everything clicks on. Being able to say like consistently, I come on site at 10 o'clock at night and I never feel fear for myself.
Right.
And then from the management side with the updating of the lights, if your lights are out and you have a break-in or any other type of emergency and your camera can't see anything, you've done yourself and your tenants a disservice. You've literally blinded yourself for no reason. And so, doing a property walk at night just to make sure everything's well lit, or reviewing your cameras and seeing, which areas could probably use a little bit more light, does a world of difference. I talked to some of my teammates internally, um, and specifically, when I ask women, what is it you look for in a self-storage facility? I want it to be well lit, and I want it to be secure. Those are the two things that drive that experience.
Yep, because self-storage facilities are creepy.
Oh, it's eerie. It's just rows and rows of doors and people's
Yes.
stuff. It
Yep.
is definitely,
Especially if it's windy and you can hear the metal moving. Oh,
yes. Yeah, if
no.
you've never
It's like
been
a
on a
scary
property at
movie.
night by yourself, it is creepy.
Yep.
And there are many a facility that I wouldn't feel safe, and I definitely wouldn't feel safe if my wife or my kid was there alone. So the well lit nature, yeah, I'm glad you touched on that, Luke, because
Yeah.
that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
totally haunted.
Yeah. Well,
That's-
yeah, and I also seen Greg's comment, what about music? And I think that kind of goes along with the next question. Or what are some of the amenities that are super important to the tenants that we need to make sure we provide? But then what are those unexpected things that really
Ooh.
surprise the tenants that they appreciate? And I think music might fall into something like that.
So music for sure. You know, it does take away from the creepiness factor. When you actually have a tune that you can listen to, and it
Yeah.
gives you something to think about when you're walking through the facility. But I'm going to go back to Tommy's, and I'm going to say it's a cold bottle of water on a hot day.
Mm,
That's
yeah.
no matter what state I'm in. Especially I'm from South Carolina. We get really hot, humid summers. When you have a moving crew, sweating, and they come in, they're just trying to tell you, like, hey, even if they're moving out or moving in, being able to be like, hey, can I grab y'all a cold bottle of water real quick? The amount of just cheer and joy that's there, like, are you for real? Like, it's like, yeah, man, it's just a
Yes.
bottle of water. But just the amount of, it's very unexpected. It's not something that people think that you're just going to turn around and offer them. But being in the industry for so long, I know most facilities have it because of that reason. It's just something so small that means so much to the people who are walking around your facility.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was
Any
the big one.
any other amenities like that that you would?
Lighting in units.
Okay. Oh,
Um,
in the units. Okay.
in the not necessarily like, hey, with its own personal light switch or with a pull cord, because I'd say 5 times out of 10 they're going to leave the light on
Yeah.
and it's going to burn out anyway. But just where your lights are positioned in relation to where your units are.
Mhm.
How many facilities I've walked on, and in the back left corner, you open the door and it's in shadow, and trying to move in and it's already dark outside. You're just adding another layer of frustration potentially to your tenant base.
Yeah,
Okay. I like
love that.
that.
Betty, you're the candy lady. Everyone loves a candy lady. So
And so I have a lot of those things listed, like music, and I saw one of the things that music can be divisive. Like, yeah, what music are you going to play? Um, I, I I remember a lady coming in telling me she hated Three Doors Down, and I was like, "This is just a radio station. Like, I didn't play it. I didn't personally choose it. Um, I was a little bit affronted because I am a Three Doors Down fan. I
Right?
literally like had to walk into my back room and turn the volume down for the whole property just because she was upset about it. And
That's hysterical.
that's amazing.
Okay, so I don't know if you guys have been reading the comments or not, but they were
They're on
talking about,
fire today.
yeah. So Melissa said the cold bottle of water and then ask for a Google review. And then Deanna said, wait a minute, print the QR code sticker for the review, put it on the water, and then hand it to them. And I think that is just golden.
That's a
And everybody
fabulous
in the
idea.
comments loves it too. Now everyone's going to start offering bottles with their QR codes on it. But great idea because you've made
Yeah.
them so happy. And then here is my request physically in your hand to, click on this and give me those 5 stars.
the best
Yeah.
part is you don't have to buy a branded bottle of water. You just order,
Right.
1,000 stickers for $9.99 and go get your deer
Yes.
cart, drop them
There
on,
you
put them in
go.
the
Go to
fridge.
Yes.
Costco. You can get 40 bottles of water for $2 at Costco. So
I love it. That
yeah,
is great.
great ideas, y'all.
Mhm.
Jennifer had a great idea earlier because it was right when you were talking about curb appeal, Luke. Jennifer mentioned that they have a giant magnet on the back of their golf cart and they'll go around the property and picking up nails
Yeah.
to keep people's tires safe. Like that's
You'd be so
Yeah.
surprised how
Yeah.
many nails and screws get
Well,
randomly dropped in your drive aisle. It's
Matthew's
unbelievable.
fiance has had, I think he's either 3 or 4 busted tires in the last couple months.
Yep.
So yeah, it definitely definitely
Es-
happened. Yeah.
Especially if you know you're renting to contractors, like if you have a lot of business units in general, just understanding where those units are located and putting some extra care with those magnets in those areas,
Yeah,
it can save you a lot of heartache.
Yeah,
for
no,
sure.
that's amazing. So yeah, great. I mean, fantastic ideas, y'all. I mean, I think honestly on a meta level, I think it's cool because y'all are here to learn from Luke about, great experiences, but y'all
Learning from
got
each
some
other.
really good ideas here. I love, yeah, comment section on fire. So let's talk about you're doing all these things, right? So how can you turn this into getting more customers? Right.
Right.
And we're on the topic of review. So Melissa, you want to tackle ask Luke that question about how we can turn these into reviews?
Oh, yeah. So, how does that, well, first of all, how does that increase occupancy with the customer experience? How is asking for those reviews translating into increased occupancy? How does that work in this?
So Google reviews, from to my understanding, I'm not a I feel like Tommy could probably answer this a little bit better than I could. But after listening to Tommy speak for the past 5 years, um, Google prioritizes reviews. The longer the review that's left, the more information that it contains, and the response from the management company that comes with it can really seriously impact your placing. When somebody Googles storage units near me or self storage in my area, the higher your review score and the more robust those reviews are, do help you rank higher. Am I right in that comment?
Oh yeah, you
Yep.
you
Perfect.
you
Okay.
you've listened well, my friend.
Yeah. And so continuously asking for that, and especially when it's a positive customer experience. I don't think any of us are chasing down the guy who does not like to store with us and says, like, will you please leave me a 1 star? So the idea is, people enjoy leaving negative reviews during negative experiences. It's
Mhm.
weird that it's not on the flip side. There's you have to ask for it, and you have to find a way to ask for it that doesn't sound like
Yeah.
can you please leave me a review, if you think I did well. And there is some awkwardness. During my management career, we were required to ask for them, and figuring out the best way to approach that was always great. I mean, I knew managers who would take the phone and be like, let me show you exactly where we'd like you to go, and they'd take it and just say, hey, can you just fill something out for us? But ultimately, saying, did you enjoy this experience? Is there anything else I can do? No, this was great. If you really did have such a great time, would you mind taking some time and leaving me a positive review? It would do the world for our facility. And if
Hmm.
they're honest, they will. And
Yeah.
especially the better you did, the more they'll feel like, pushing
You
forward.
you mentioned how a well-worded review does wonders for that ranking, and it absolutely does. If you get reviews back that are kind of vague, use that opportunity to respond, to put some of those keywords in there when they say, "Oh, the manager was great," but then they don't elaborate. Maybe your response is, "Thanks so much for that 5-star review. We take customer service here really seriously."
Yeah.
And put those phrases back in to that
Mhm.
response to help, boost that review even more. Um, Tommy, do you want to address the chat that's going on with the review
Yeah, yeah. So
a little
y'all are
bit?
yeah, so y'all are in yeah. So Melissa Lewis, thank you for calling it out. Incentivizing reviews with money or some kind of payment is definitely scary territory because it's actually against Google's terms
Yeah.
of service. And in fact, it may even just be illegal outright. Like incentivizing for reviews is just
Yeah.
actually like legally against the law kind of thing. And what Google would do is they can actually shut down your Google business at worst, and then at minimum they can remove your reviews. Neither of those are fun situations to be in. So all that said, yeah, it's actually against the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, to pay for solicited reviews. So definitely something to keep an eye out for. So what we would recommend doing is, I think Melissa, you said it earlier, make every experience worthy of a 5-star review.
Right.
And ask them, like, Luke, your script there was spot on. Like, hey, how was your experience today? Was I able to help you anything? Is there anything else I can help you with? Well, great. Well, it would help me out a lot if you left us a review. I'm going to make it easy for you. Here's a QR link, or I can just shoot you a text message
Yeah.
and just send the customer straight to that page where they can leave a review. I think that's definitely like the as the bread and butter way of doing it.
And
And I,
Corey
and,
said
and I
it right. It's better to incentivize your managers. So if you're
Yes.
used to incentivizing customers, flip that around. Make some contests for your management team of who can get the most reviews this month. You put that money to better use and to legal use, and don't run that risk of getting your page shut down because if you disappear from Google, you might as well close your doors. You don't exist, you can't be found. So
Can't be
that is
found.
not a good thing. So
Yeah.
Also, if you have multiple properties and you notice that one of your managers is getting, typically when managers ask for reviews, you can tell who's providing the great level of service because it'll name drop that manager in
yes.
multiple different
Yeah.
review policies. So if you have a manager who's very strong in getting reviews, maybe even just organically without even having to ask for them, what is that manager doing or saying differently than some of your other managers? And how can you, not necessarily shadow, but role play or, provide an opportunity to learn and say, hey, like this is something I want to work on. You seem to be very good at it. What's your trick? How
What
do
do
you
you say? Yeah.
how do you get past that first piece to say like, oh yeah, I
Yeah.
would love to do that for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, so reviews important, recommend it highly, 100%. So Melissa, we got some good Q&A. You want to
We do. Yeah, I was looking at
Yeah.
that. So let's just start at the top. Jennifer asks, what kind of availability are you offering off hours? We had a cell phone for emergency and it would ring at 2 a.m. asking if there was a red lock. It got out of control. So how do you address those after hour calls, Luke?
So I fortunately and somewhat unfortunately, I lived on site for the majority of my career. Like I lived, ate, and breathed storage for a long time. And yes, there will be instances, that you're not going to be perfect. No matter how hard we try, if there's something that's going to slip. Yes, maybe the red lock didn't get taken off.
Right.
For them to believe that you were going to answer the phone at 2 in the morning is kind of a stretch. Um, but this kind of goes back to, being available. Did they leave a message, and are you able to touch base with them first thing in the morning and trying to set that as, as consistently as possible. But after hours, some people employ a call center, some people utilize U-Haul and their back end call center. Um, but ultimately, it's going to be what works for you as an owner operator and what works best for your management team. I don't want to sit up here and say everybody should buy their manager a cell phone and make sure that it's always on, no matter what time it is, because that's just it's not applicable to most people.
Right.
So on the flip side, it's have you given them other means of contacting you? Can they send you an email? Can they leave you a message so that you can try and, jump on it first thing in the morning and try and show like, hey, sorry, we were closed, but here's what I can do now that we're available.
Mm-hmm. I think it goes back to training your tenant of what's acceptable and what's not. So when, like Jennifer, you answered the phone at 2 a.m. thinking that it's an actual emergency because who in their right mind makes a phone call at 2 a.m. unless there's actually an emergency? I think it goes back to having those very frank conversations with the customer of it is 2 in the morning. This is not an emergency. Call me back at 9 a.m. and do not call me again at 2. Click. You don't have to try to fix their problem then. It's a very clear training issue with the tenants themselves. And once they realize that, whoa, because sometimes they're thinking, oh, I'm going to call and leave a message, or there's some kind of after hours answering service, and they don't really realize the manager that works behind the desk is the one sometimes that's answering that phone call. Because I've had those calls too, and they're like, oh, I didn't expect anyone to answer. And then it kind of clicks with them that, it's 2 a.m. and I've called for something really stupid. So I think it goes back to that conversation of Brandy. I think that's a good idea. If you tell your tenants to call back if it's an actual emergency, otherwise just leave a message. So you can
Yeah.
work out ways and communicate that with your tenants so that you can still get the emergencies through, but don't have to worry about the other things. You want to grab another question there, Tommy?
Yeah, let's look at oh, this is probably a good one. Luke, we didn't touch on this too much as far as like requirements of tenants, right? And so
Mhm.
Julie had us a question here. Hey, we're having a hard time increasing occupancy at our facility in Jasper, Alabama. I feel like where potential tenants move on is when we tell them we require tenant insurance. Any pointers on how to sell that if your policy is to require tenant insurance? That's a really good question, Julie.
Mm-hmm.
It is a really good question, and I try not to tell people, what to do, um, or how you should, project your lease or how you should sell your product. If you're requiring insurance, there is the okay, yeah, I am requiring it. Are you requiring that they purchase yours, or they are just requiring that they provide some proof of insurance? Because if you're only saying it one way and you're making it sound like I'm requiring you to buy this $9 policy,
Mm.
it could create some friction on the where you could have said like, hey, insurance is required. I can put this policy on your account for now, but if you can please provide me with your homeowners, showing that additional structures or however whatever it's listed as in the state that you're in, showing that these items are covered under insurance, I would greatly appreciate it. If you really want to get into like the sales of it, it's to me the one that always worked was, let's say you put a $600 mattress in a non-climate unit and you don't put insurance on it. There's a leak that sometimes happens. Your mattress gets ruined. Are you really going to spend $1,000 as a deductible to replace a $600 mattress? Or would
Right.
you rather have paid the $995 every single month and not have to even worry about it? You can just submit the claim and they'll send you the check.
Right.
Convincing people of that is part of your sales tactic. It's how you want to approach it. But I think offering the ability to say like, hey, if you do have some supplemental insurance on your own, we can accept it, and you're not necessarily required to purchase ours.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So Julie, if y'all can update, maybe think about making it flexible in the sense that hey, if you offer any sort of if you have any insurance that covers it, then maybe you don't have to purchase yours. I think that's a good one way to look at it. So yeah, fantastic. Um, so yeah, what a Luke, thanks for coming out, man. We're
Yeah.
we're we're on the
This has
home
been
stretch
great.
here. We're a little bit past 3. We're gonna let people get back to work, but I do
I
have
will say,
oh, go ahead, Luke, go.
regarding the insurance question, these are the reasons that you may want to think about joining your local self-storage association.
Ooh,
These are
good plug.
questions that pop up all the time, and you
Yes,
typically
yes,
Yep.
will
yes.
have vendors, insurance vendors that are affiliated with your SSA that can potentially provide you some additional information.
Ooh, I
Yep.
dig
I
it.
like it.
I dig it. You're my man. I love it, man. So yeah, so question of the week. Which one adjustment, if you had just one to improve your customer experience, would have the most impact on your occupancy?
It's the word I think I've repeated the most this entire conversation. It's change your consistency. Work on doing the small things every single day. And I don't want to promise necessarily, but I guarantee actually that you'll see those bigger things that have been continuing to impact you start to get resolved, because most big problems are made up of small problems. And
Mm,
if you can start to just slowly impact your facility quality, continue working, on building rapport with your tenant base, and ultimately just continuing trying to provide a consistent consumer experience, you're
Mm-hmm.
setting yourself apart.
Yep. Exactly.
that's
Wow.
awesome, man. I love that. That's such good advice. Melissa, what about you? What's one change that you would suggest or recommend?
While he was talking, I was thinking consistency as well, because it goes back to what I said earlier of just knowing that you've always had that same level of service every single time. You're always providing that 5-star service, then everyone knows what to expect. But I mean, it can be as simple as, how am I answering the phone every single time? It's the little bitty things that really do make a difference. And those the little details that help make an experience better, so that when a big problem does pop up, you have such a nice feeling about this facility or about this manager, about this location, that that big problem doesn't seem quite as big, because you know how well things are taken care of all the rest of the time, because things
Mhm.
do happen.
Absolutely.
Roofs leak, units get broken into, gates don't work, things happen. And our facilities are just full of a million different things that can go wrong. And it goes back to, what are those other little details that have made the experience so pleasant up to that point, that it makes it a little easier to swallow this issue. I might be irritated about it, but I'm so overwhelmed with how good you are in all the other aspects, that I can get past it and we're
That's
good.
really cool.
And I think it can go in the opposite direction too,
Yes.
which is when a lot of our leases and are they I still think they are word of mouth. And so when somebody is recommending your facility, you want them to say good things. And if they say good things and that person comes and they're provided that same level of experience, they're going to go tell their friend. And I know not everybody's going to lease up, but when the next time somebody says like, man, I got to put some stuff in storage, I don't know where to start. There's his buddy can say like, actually, I got a storage unit down the street with whomever. I haven't had any issues. And that's all you want them to say. I
That's
haven't
amazing.
had any
Yes.
issues. You know, like it's
Yeah.
clean. I don't have to call the manager. I'm not in there every day fussing about something. Like, no, it was an easy process. It makes it easier for movers to recommend your services because they've
Ooh.
put things in your facility. Is your property easy to get around in a moving truck? All of these things, those small things make such big impacts to different people and can really change the way your facility is viewed.
Absolutely.
Wow. I love that so much, y'all. Well, Luke, thank you for coming out. If people want to get a hold of you to ask you more questions or advice on any of these customer experience related topics, what's the best way to get hold of you?
I am on LinkedIn under Lucas D. Westbrooks. You can email me at Luke Westbrooks at the ziprealestatepartners.com. But ultimately, I think if you need to get in touch with me, you can always ask Tommy. Tommy's got my phone number. He can help you out. Yeah, I'm always available to help anybody any way I can. And so please, if you have any questions, shoot them over.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming out and dropping some knowledge. I mean, this was such a good conversation. And Melissa, I think like Luke had some amazing stuff, but I loved how the audience was like, "Yeah, we vibe with this. Like this is stuff that we believe in." It's our crowd that we've that we've curated. So
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
incredible. April, you may not be in the audience anymore, but I heard that you were asking earlier about, hey, can I get a recording of this? Yes, you can. It's available on Gabfocus podcast, available on our YouTube channel, and of course available on storagepug.com/resources. If you're not already part of the Gabfocus Facebook group, join it and have some lively conversations there. Next time you'll see Melissa and I. Melissa will have a high school graduate, and I will have baby number two.
My
But we're doing this on June 27th. We have the good, better, and best in storage security. I think this is going to be a crazy fun topic.
Yes.
We're bringing the one and only Aaron Harwell from Spider Door. He's going to drop some security knowledge on us, and he has owned many a facility in his
Yep.
career, and he now runs Spider Door, and so he can give us the vendor side and the owner operator side. And there, much like what Luke said today, there's not always one right way of doing things in self-storage, and security is probably one of those where, yeah, you have choices. You have good, better, and best. There's also a lot of wrongs, like shared gate codes. Stop that.
Oh my gosh.
Everyone's gate
That
code
is
is
not acceptable in
9999.
2024.
Yeah. So that doesn't fit in good, better, or best,
No.
but we're excited to have this. So join us on June 27th, y'all. And if you have questions about security beforehand, email myself, Tommy at storagepug.com, or Melissa. And we'll be happy to make sure we slot your questions in. But otherwise, thank you for coming today. Episode number 60, Big 60. Incredible. And Luke, so happy you got to join us as our surprise guest for the week.
I appreciate it, Tommy. Thank you all so much for having me on, and look forward to catching y'all's next one.
Thanks.